One of the hardest things I found about being an entrepreneur was setting boundaries with my clients. In this video, I'm going to share with you a little bit about what I learned about how to set effective boundaries with clients without losing those clients. So first, I'm going to share a little bit about the problems that we face with setting boundaries, why it can be so difficult, the simple solution to that problem, and then some steps that you can take, including one magic phrase that always works, that I absolutely love, that will set you free from all sorts of client problems. When I was growing up, my dad always had this phrase that he used, and it drove me crazy. He said, "He who has the gold sets the rules." And of course, because my dad was the one with all the gold in our family, he set all the rules. And that really royally annoyed me. And so, but the thing about that is that as I grew up, I didn't realize that I really internalized that lesson far beyond just my family. I took it with me into business, into my jobs, where I always felt like everyone who had the money, my bosses, the owner of the company, my clients later as I became an entrepreneur, they had the money to pay me, so they set the rules. That was the relationship that I had with authority figures, let's call them. So the thing about it, now as a 46-year-old woman, I found that doesn't serve me very well in business, to always be looking at everyone who pays me as the boss of me. The solution is to remember that you are the boss of you and you set the rules. All right. So from that foundation, from that new context, let me draw you a picture to make this abundantly clear. My coach drew this picture for me several years ago, and it is etched and burned into my memory forever and ever. Amen. Here is what it looks like when you are down here and the person who, your client, is up here. When the relationship is like this, unbalanced, the client cannot see you as a leader. They see you as a subordinate. And that happens energetically. If you feel like a subordinate, you're going to show up like a subordinate. So early on in the relationship, and by the way, the earlier you do this, the better. Like from the very first phone call. And in fact, one of the things that I do on that very first call with any new client, before they've even signed up to work with me, is I take this call and I flip this to this way. The goal is for you to be here and the client to be here. Now, that doesn't mean that you're better than the client or that you're trying to dominate the client, but simply that in this field, in this area of your expertise, that you are taking on the leadership role. And the earlier you do that, the better. Now, a question I often get is, well, Michelle, what about if you're like this? If you're here and the client is here, isn't that what we all want? We all want to be equal. Well, yeah, we're all equal as humans, right? That's part of our belief system as Americans, equality and liberty for all. But in the world of business, you need to be the leader of that relationship in order for the client to trust you, to listen to you, and to not walk all over you. So what you want to do is, at all times, before you even engage with a client, do what you need to do to step into this role, to step energetically into your power. Now, that could be as simple as changing your posture, standing up straighter and taller, taking a deep breath, remembering a time when you were really confident and really ready before you hop on with a client, especially with a client that tends to be maybe domineering or intimidating. So that's the first thing. This is the energetic piece, right? Getting into that right state of mind, frame of mind. But that's not all there is to it. Another piece about setting boundaries with clients is to create clarity and clear agreements. One of the biggest problems is not creating guidelines, not creating agreements, and just assuming that clients are going to show up the way you want them to. The best time to establish agreements is before you even get started working. Here's my magic phrase, the one I promised you at the beginning of this video. This always works. And whenever you're in trouble, just whip this phrase out and complete it. So It is, the way I work is, Mr. Client, the way that I work is I work between Monday and Thursday. Fridays I take off with my family. Or you don't even have to explain what you do on Fridays. The way I work is I take client calls on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The way I work is every client call happens in the morning of Wednesday or something like that. The way I work is it establishes you as leader and it establishes a boundary. Now, the beautiful thing about that is that then you can be a super awesome, nice person when and if you decide, oh yes, Mr. Client, I know this is an emergency for you, so you know what I'll do? I'll make an exception and I'll go ahead and meet with you at Tuesday or at 5 p.m. or at 7 p.m. or whatever, but you're making the exception. And again, you are the boss. You are running the show. So when you establish those agreements up front and use the phrase, the way I work is, you generally get a lot less pushback for a couple of reasons. Number one, because you're making an explicit claim, you're making an explicit agreement. And number two, because you're taking ownership. You're leading the conversation. You're leading the relationship. And let me tell you something. When you take on that energy in a business relationship with a client, they're going to trust you more. It's going to be a better relationship. Kind of think of it like I'm getting a puppy. And so I'm doing all this homework and research on raising a puppy and how to raise a puppy that's healthy and happy. And one of the things they talk about is how puppies need a boss. They need an alpha. They need a leader, and you need to be that leader. Well, it's kind of the same with clients. Clients are coming to you because they need your expertise. They need your services. They want to work with you. They want to be led. And if a client is unwilling to be led, if they're unwilling to cede this position and become the person that is being led by you, then chances are they're not going to be a great client to work with. They're not going to be that much fun. They're going to push the boundaries. And I invite you to consider that if you're attached to a client and you're not willing to walk away in order to hold your boundaries and hold your standards, then that's something for you to work on too. What I've found is that it's much easier to be a leader to a client when you're not attached to that client, when you don't need them desperately. So that's part of the work too. So if you're liking this video, before I get to the last point, I'm gonna do a little shameless plug and ask you to please like the video. And if you have questions, please post them in the comments below. I always do my best to try to answer your questions and or include them in an upcoming video. Okay, so the final point is always leave yourself an out. An out being room to renegotiate your agreements. So you can create agreements in the beginning, and what I recommend is always including in your contract, whether it's a verbal contract or a written one, always including a clause or a caveat that you will come back and re-look at these agreements to make sure that they're working. Every 3 months, every 6 months, every year, whatever. Leave yourself room to incorporate new truths as they become evident. You might be working with a client for 3 months and realize something new that's working or not working. And then if you've got a year-long contract, you might feel like, oh, I can't say anything about this. But if it's really a struggle or if it's really impacting you or your work or your enjoyment or any of it, then you need to address it, and the sooner the better. And it's a lot easier to do that when you've left yourself an out early on that you can always come back to and say, hey, Mr. Client or Ms. Client, remember how I said that we would touch base in 3 months? Well, we're at the 3-month mark, and there are a few things that I want to talk about with you about how this is going and how we could make it even better. If you found this video engaging, enjoyable, educational, and you want to go deeper, check out my free Monetize Your Magic playbook. It's a guide for how you can align what you do with who you really are so you can find more grace, more ease, more enjoyment, and more flow. Check it out at monetizeyourmagicplaybook.com. Enjoy.